the wagon lurched over another rock, and Lydia Lancaster gripped the wooden bench harder, her knuckles white beneath her lace gloves as she stared at the back of her future husband's head, and realized she would rather face the desert alone than spend one more minute traveling toward a life she never chose. It was 1882, and the Nevada territory stretched endlessly on both sides of the rough trail, all sagebrush and scattered pinyon pines under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Tonopah was still 3 days away, according to Clement Wordsworth, the banker from San Francisco who had paid her father's debts in exchange for her hand. Clement sat up front with the driver, his perfectly groomed hair somehow staying in place despite the dust, his suit jacket buttoned even in the heat. He had not looked at her once since they left the last town. Lydia was 20 years old, and this was supposed to be her wedding journey, but there had been no proposal, no courtship, just her father's apologetic eyes as he signed the papers. Clement was 43, soft around the middle, soft in his handshake, soft in every way except his eyes when he discussed money. Those were hard as river stones. The wagon hit another rut, and Lydia's carpetbag slid closer to the edge. She caught it instinctively, her fingers brushing the leather handle, and something fierce sparked in her chest. The desert was dangerous, yes. There were rattlesnakes and scorpions, mountain lions, and men far worse than animals. But at least it was honest about wanting to kill you. They stopped at midday to water the horses at a creek that barely deserved the name. Clement climbed down with a grunt, consulting his pocket watch as if the sun itself might be running late. The driver, a grizzled man named Pete, who had not spoken more than 10 words since Sacramento, began checking the harnesses. Lydia stepped down from the wagon, her traveling dress immediately collecting dust at the hem. Her legs were stiff from sitting, and she walked a few steps away, stretching under the pretense of examining the landscape. The creek bed wound through a small canyon, disappearing around a bend where cottonwood trees promised shade. Beyond that, the mountains rose up, ancient and indifferent. "Do not wander far," Clement called without turning around. "We leave in 15 minutes. Something in Lydia snapped clean through. She looked at the mountains. She looked at Clement's back. She looked at her carpetbag still sitting in the wagon, containing everything she owned. 2 dresses, a hairbrush, her mother's Bible, 3 books, and the silver locket her grandmother had given her. Then she looked at herself, at the lace gloves, and the traveling dress and the life those things represented. 15 minutes, he had said. Lydia walked toward the cottonwoods. Her heart was beating so hard she could hear it in her ears, a drum calling her forward. She reached the bend in the creek and kept going. The canyon narrowed, rocks rising on either side, the creek trickling over smooth stones. She walked faster. Behind her, she heard Clement call something, his voice sharp with annoyance rather than concern. She started running. The canyon twisted and turned, and Lydia ran until her lungs burned, until her fancy boots blistered her heels, until she could no longer hear anything but the blood rushing in her head and the distant cry of a hawk overhead. She ran until she tripped over a root and fell hard on her hands and knees in the dirt, her dress tearing, her gloves shredding. She stayed there for a moment, gasping, and then she started laughing. It came out wild and breathless, echoing off the canyon walls. She had done it. She had actually done it. The laughter died when she heard the horse. Lydia scrambled to her feet, spinning around, expecting to see Clement or Pete coming after her. But the man who rode around the bend was neither of them. He sat astride a large buckskin horse, and he was bigger than any man she had ever seen, broad-shouldered and heavily muscled, with dark hair that fell past his collar and a beard that covered half his face. He wore buckskin trousers and a worn leather vest over a rough cotton shirt, and he carried a rifle across his saddle with the ease of someone who knew how to use it. He pulled the horse to a stop and looked down at her with eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. "You running from something or to something?" His voice was deep and rough, like he did not use it often. Lydia's heart hammered. She had no weapon, no plan, nothing but her torn dress and bleeding hands. "From," she said, lifting her chin. "Definitely from." He studied her for a long moment, taking in her fine clothes and her obvious lack of supplies. "You are not going to make it far in those boots." "I will manage." "The desert does not care about your determination, madam. It will kill you just the same." He shifted in the saddle, and she saw the easy strength in the movement, the kind that came from living hard. "Where were you headed?" "Away." His mouth might have twitched under the beard. She could not be sure. "That is a direction, not a destination." Behind her, further up the canyon, she heard voices calling. Clement's voice, high and angry. Pete's voice, lower and more cautious. They were coming after her. The mountain man heard it too. His eyes flicked past her toward the sound, then back to her face. "Those the people you are running from?" "One of them." Lydia's throat was tight. "Please, I cannot go back." He was quiet for a moment, studying her again with those amber eyes. Then he held out his hand. "Get on." She hesitated only a second before grasping his hand. His palm was rough with calluses, and when he pulled, she practically flew into the saddle behind him. The horse sidestepped once, adjusting to the extra weight. And then the man touched his heels to its flanks, and they were moving. Lydia grabbed onto his vest, feeling the solid muscle beneath the leather. They rode quickly through the canyon, the horse's hooves splashing through the creek, and then they were climbing up the side, following a trail she never would have seen. Behind them, the voices grew fainter. They rode for what felt like hours, though the sun said it was less. The mountain man did not speak, just guided the horse through terrain that grew increasingly rough, increasingly wild. Lydia held on, her arms aching, her whole body aching, but she did not complain. This was freedom, even if she had no idea where it led. Finally, as the sun was starting to sink toward the western mountains, they reached a clearing tucked into the hillside. There was a cabin there, rough-hewn logs chinked with mud, a stone chimney, a small corral with 2 more horses. A creek ran nearby, this one with actual water. It looked like something from a different century, completely removed from civilization. The man dismounted and held up his hands to help her down. Lydia slid from the saddle, her legs nearly buckling when her feet hit the ground. He steadied her with one hand on her elbow, and she was struck again by his sheer size. He had to be well over 6 feet, with shoulders that seemed built for carrying the weight of the world. "Thank you," she said, finding her voice. "I do not know what I would have done if you had not come along." "Died, most likely." He said it matter-of-factly, without cruelty. "You want to tell me what you were running from?" Lydia looked at the cabin, at the wilderness surrounding it, at this stranger who had just saved her life. She had no reason to trust him beyond the fact that he had not hurt her yet. But something in his steady gaze made her want to tell the truth. "A marriage I did not agree to," she said. "My father sold me to pay his debts. The man I was supposed to marry was taking me to Tonopah." The mountain man's jaw tightened under his beard. "And you jumped off the wagon." "I could not do it," Lydia said quietly. "I could not spend my life with a man who looks at me like I am a piece of property he purchased. I would rather take my chances out here." He nodded slowly, as if that made perfect sense to him. "You have any supplies? Food? Water, anything? No. It all happened rather quickly. I figured. He turned toward the cabin. Come on. You need to clean those hands, and we need to figure out what happens next. Lydia followed him inside. The cabin was sparse but clean, with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, a single bed in the corner covered with furs, shelves holding supplies, and hooks on the wall with various tools and weapons. It smelled like wood smoke and leather and something wild she could not name. He gestured to a chair by the table and went to a shelf, coming back with a tin basin and a cloth. He poured water from a jug and set it in front of her. Wash your hands. I will see what I can do about those cuts. Lydia removed what remained of her gloves and dipped her hands in the water, hissing at the sting. The mountain man watched for a moment, then went back to the shelf and returned with a small jar of something that looked like salve. What is your name? She asked as he opened the jar. Wyatt Zimmerman. I am Lydia Lancaster. I figured you had a name. He gestured for her to hold out her hands. When she did, he applied the salve with surprisingly gentle fingers, given their size. This will help with the cuts. Keep them clean, and they should heal fine. Up close, Lydia could see his face better. He was younger than she had first thought, maybe late 20s, though the beard and the hard life made it difficult to tell. His hands were scarred and rough, the hands of someone who worked with them constantly. There was a quietness to him, a stillness that felt like the mountains themselves. Why do you live all the way out here? She asked. I like the quiet. He finished with her hands and stepped back. And I do not like towns much. What do you do? Trap mostly, hunt, sell the furs when I need supplies. He put the jar back on the shelf. I take it you are from the city. San Francisco. My father was a banker until he was not very good at being a banker anymore. Lydia looked down at her torn dress. I have never been this far from civilization before. It shows. But there was no mockery in his voice, just observation. Are they going to come looking for you? I do not know. Maybe. Clement paid a lot of money for me. Wyatt's face darkened. Well, they will not find you up here. This canyon is not on any map, and the trails are hard to follow if you do not know them. You are safe for now. For now? He looked at her directly. You cannot stay here forever, Miss Lancaster. You need to figure out what you want to do next, where you want to go. Lydia felt a flutter of panic in her chest. She had been so focused on running away that she had not thought about running toward anything. I do not know, she admitted. I just knew I could not marry him. I could not live that life. That is a start, Wyatt said. Get some rest. We will figure out the details tomorrow. He gave her the bed, insisting over her protests that he was used to sleeping on the floor. He made a simple dinner of beans and salt pork, which tasted better than anything Lydia had eaten in the past week. As darkness fell, he lit a single lantern and sat by the fire, cleaning his rifle with practiced efficiency. Lydia lay in the bed, wrapped in furs that smelled like pine and smoke, and watched him work. The firelight played across his profile, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the breadth of his shoulders. He moved with complete confidence, completely at home in this wild place. She should have been terrified. She was alone in a cabin in the middle of nowhere with a man she did not know, a man who could do anything he wanted to her and no one would ever know. But she was not afraid of him. Something in her gut said he was safer than any civilized man she had ever met. Thank you, she said into the quiet, for helping me. You did not have to. Wyatt glanced over, his amber eyes catching the firelight. Yes, I did. She did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under, and she slept deeper than she had in months. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of someone moving around the cabin. Lydia sat up, disoriented for a moment, then remembered where she was. Wyatt was at the fireplace, tending something in a pan. The door was open, letting in the cool morning air and the sound of birds. "Morning," he said without turning around. "There is coffee if you want it." Lydia got up, smoothing down her ruined dress. In the daylight, the cabin looked even more austere, but there was a kind of beauty to its simplicity. Everything had a purpose, nothing wasted. She poured herself coffee from the pot hanging over the fire and took a careful sip. It was strong and bitter and exactly what she needed. "How long have you lived here?" 5 years, give or take." Wyatt flipped whatever he was cooking. "Built the cabin myself the first winter." "Do you ever get lonely?" He was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes. But I was lonelier in town, surrounded by people. At least out here the quiet is honest." Lydia thought she understood that better than he knew. She had been surrounded by people her whole life, drowning in their expectations and demands, and had never felt more alone. They ate breakfast in comfortable silence, and then Wyatt stood and gestured to the door. "Come on, I want to show you something." She followed him outside, where the morning sun was just starting to warm the air. He led her to the edge of the clearing, where the land dropped away into the valley below. From here, she could see for miles, all the way to the mountains on the far side. The desert stretched between, vast and empty and beautiful in its harshness. "This is why I stay," Wyatt said quietly. "This view, this feeling. It reminds me that I am just one small part of something much bigger. It helps when things feel too heavy." Lydia stared out at the landscape, feeling something shift in her chest. She had spent her whole life in rooms with walls and expectations, never realizing how much space there was beyond them. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "It is real," Wyatt corrected. "That is better than beautiful." They stood there for a while, neither speaking, just existing in the moment. Finally, Wyatt cleared his throat. "We need to talk about what you are going to do." Lydia's stomach tightened. "I know." "You have family anywhere? Someone who might take you in?" "My mother died when I was 12. My father is the one who sold me to Clement. I have an aunt in Virginia, but I have not seen her in years, and I do not know if she would help." Lydia wrapped her arms around herself. "I do not have many options." "Can you read and write?" "Yes, of course." "Do numbers?" "I kept my father's books for years. I am quite good with figures." Wyatt nodded thoughtfully. "There are towns that need teachers, bookkeepers, people with education. You could find work." "What town would hire a woman who ran away from her intended husband?" "Word will spread, especially if Clement is looking for me." "Then we go somewhere word has not spread yet." Wyatt turned to look at her. "There are mining camps popping up all over this territory, new ones every month. They are rough, but they need people with skills. You could start fresh, use a different name if you want." "You make it sound so simple." "It is not simple. It is hard and dirty and dangerous. But it is possible." His amber eyes were steady on hers. "The question is whether you want it badly enough to work for it." Lydia thought about Clement's soft hands and hard eyes. She thought about her father's apologetic smile as he signed her away. She thought about all the years she had spent being polite and obedient and proper, molding herself into what everyone else wanted her to be. "I want it," she said fiercely. "I want to be free." Something shifted in Wyatt's expression, a flicker of approval or respect. She could not tell which. Then we will figure it out. But first, you need better clothes. You cannot travel in that dress. He went back into the cabin and emerged with a bundle of clothing. These were my mother's, he said gruffly. She passed 5 years back, but I kept some of her things. They might fit you better than mine. Lydia took the bundle, touched by the gesture. Thank you. The clothes were simple: a worn cotton dress, a leather vest, sturdy boots that were only slightly too large. When she changed, she felt like a different person, someone capable and strong. The fancy traveling dress lay discarded on the floor, and she did not feel even a moment of regret. Over the next few days, Wyatt taught her how to survive in the wilderness. He showed her which plants were edible and which were poisonous, how to follow a creek to find water, how to read the sky for weather. He taught her to shoot, setting up targets behind the cabin and standing behind her to correct her stance, his hands steady on her shoulders as he explained about breathing and trigger pull. Lydia learned quickly, driven by a determination she had never known she possessed. Her hands, once soft and delicate, became calloused from work, her skin tanned from the sun. She learned to move quietly through the brush, to listen to the sounds of the forest, to trust her instincts. And she learned about Wyatt. He had grown up in Missouri, he told her one evening as they sat by the fire. His father had been a farmer, his mother a schoolteacher. They had been good people, kind people. But Wyatt had never fit into their world. He was too restless, too wild. When he was 22, he had headed west, looking for something he could not name. He had worked as a ranch hand, a miner, a scout, before finally settling in these mountains where he could be alone with his thoughts. Do you ever regret it? Lydia asked. Leaving? No. Wyatt stared into the fire. I regret that it hurt them when I left. But I do not regret going. Some people are meant to put down roots. Others are meant to be like water, always moving. Which one am I? The question came out before Lydia could stop it. Wyatt looked at her, his eyes reflecting the flames. I think you are figuring that out. The days stretched into a week, then 2. Lydia knew she should be making plans to leave, to find a town and start her new life. But something kept her in that cabin, in that clearing, with this quiet mountain man who asked nothing of her except that she be honest. She watched him work, the way his muscles moved under his shirt when he chopped wood, the way his large hands could be so gentle when he treated an injured animal he found in the forest. She listened to his voice, rare but rich when he spoke. She learned his silences, could read his moods in the set of his shoulders, the line of his jaw. And she realized, with a flutter of something dangerous in her chest, that she was falling in love with him. It was nothing like the romance novels she had read, with their declarations and grand gestures. It was quiet and slow, like a seed taking root. It was the way he made sure she ate enough at every meal, the way he left the warmest furs for her at night, the way he never once made her feel weak or incapable, even when she made mistakes. It was the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching, his eyes soft with something he never put into words. One evening, as Lydia was washing dishes in the creek, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. Voices, men's voices, coming up the canyon. She dropped the pan and ran back to the cabin. Wyatt was already outside, rifle in hand, his expression grim. Get inside, he said quietly. Stay away from the windows. Who is it? I do not know yet, but we are about to find out. Lydia wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. She went inside, her heart pounding, and positioned herself where she could see through a crack in the door. 3 men rode into the clearing, They were rough-looking, unshaven, their clothes dirty and their eyes hungry. The kind of men who would take what they wanted and leave nothing but destruction behind. "Help you, gentlemen?" Wyatt's voice was calm, but Lydia could see the tension in his stance. The man in front, a heavy-set brute with a scar across his cheek, looked around the clearing with obvious interest. "Heard there was a trapper up this way. Thought we would stop by, see if you had any pelts to sell." "Not selling." "That is unfriendly." The man's eyes lingered on the cabin. "You up here all alone?" "I am now that you showed up," Wyatt said flatly. "And I prefer it the other way." The scarred man laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We have been riding for days, friend. Could use some food, maybe a place to rest. There is a town 20 miles south. You can rest there. 20 miles is a long way." The man shifted in his saddle, and Lydia saw his hand drift toward the gun at his hip. "We would rather rest here." The tension in the clearing was thick enough to cut. Lydia looked around frantically for a weapon, finding Wyatt's spare rifle on the wall. Her hands shook as she loaded it, remembering everything he had taught her. "You need to leave," Wyatt said, his voice dropping lower. "Now." The scarred man's face hardened. "I do not think—" He never finished the sentence. Wyatt's rifle came up in one smooth motion, the barrel aimed directly at the man's chest. "I am going to give you to the count of 3 to turn those horses around." For a long moment, nobody moved. Lydia held her breath, the rifle clutched in her sweaty hands, prepared to do whatever was necessary. Then the scarred man spat in the dirt and yanked his horse's reins. "You just made a mistake, friend." "Would not be my first." Wyatt did not lower the rifle. The 3 men wheeled their horses around and rode back down the canyon. But Lydia could see the way they looked back, the calculation in their eyes. They were not done with this. Wyatt stood there until the sound of hooves faded completely, then lowered the rifle and came inside. His face was tight with worry. "They are coming back," Lydia said. It was not a question. Probably. Men like that do not like being told no. He set the rifle down and ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. "I am sorry. I should have been more careful. Should have been watching the trails. This is not your fault. You are here because of me. That makes it my responsibility." Wyatt looked at her, and something fierce burned in his amber eyes. "I am not going to let anything happen to you, Lydia. You understand me?" Her name sounded different when he said it, rough and careful at the same time. Lydia nodded, not trusting her voice. They spent the rest of the evening preparing. Wyatt checked all his weapons, loaded extra ammunition, secured the cabin's shutters. Lydia helped where she could, her mind racing. She had run from one danger straight into another, and she had brought it to Wyatt's doorstep. "Maybe I should leave," she said as they worked. "If I am gone, they will not have any reason to come back." Wyatt stopped what he was doing and looked at her like she had lost her mind. "You are not going anywhere." "But, Lydia." He crossed the cabin in 2 strides, standing close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Those men are not here because of you. They are here because they think they can take what they want. If you leave, they will just find someone else to terrorize, and I am not going to let you walk out there alone where they can find you." "Why?" The question burst out of her. "Why do you care so much? You do not know me. I am just some foolish city girl who jumped off a wagon." "You are not foolish." Wyatt's voice was rough. "You are the bravest person I have ever met. You saw a life you did not want, and you changed it. Consequences be damned. Do you know how rare that is? I was terrified. Being brave does not mean you are not scared. It means you do it anyway. His hand came up, almost touching her face, then dropped back to his side. And I care because I do. That is all. It was not all. Lydia could see it in his eyes, feel it in the air between them, this thing that had been building for weeks. But before she could find the words, before she could close the distance between them, a shout from outside shattered the moment. They were back. Wyatt grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. Lydia got her rifle and took up position on the other side, just like they had practiced. Through the shutters, she could see at least 5 men now, the original 3 plus 2 more. They had spread out around the clearing, rifles drawn. "Come on out, mountain man," the scarred leader called. "We just want to talk." "We already talked," Wyatt shouted back. "You did not like what I had to say." "We have been thinking about that. Thinking maybe you are hiding something valuable up here. Something worth protecting." The man's voice turned sly. "Maybe something pretty." Lydia's blood ran cold. They knew she was here. "Last chance to leave peacefully," Wyatt said. His voice was steady, but Lydia could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his finger rested on the trigger. "Now, why would we do that?" The scarred man nodded to his companions. The first shot shattered the evening quiet. Wyatt returned fire immediately, his shot taking one man in the shoulder and spinning him out of the saddle. The clearing erupted into chaos. Bullets thudding into the cabin walls, the horses screaming and rearing. Lydia aimed carefully at one of the men trying to circle around the side, just like Wyatt had taught her. She squeezed the trigger, felt the rifle kick against her shoulder. The man yelped and dove for cover, blood blooming on his leg. "Good shot," Wyatt said, already reloading. "Keep them pinned down." They held the cabin for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Wyatt was a deadly shot, methodical and calm despite the chaos. Lydia loaded and fired, her hands steady even though her heart was racing. But they were outnumbered, and eventually, one of the men managed to get close enough to throw something through the window. It hit the floor with a thud, and Lydia saw it was a torch. "Damn it!" Wyatt snarled. He crushed the torch under his boot before it could catch. But the message was clear. They were going to burn them out. "We cannot stay here," Lydia said. "I know." Wyatt was already moving, grabbing supplies and shoving them into a pack. "There is a back way out, through the cellar. It leads to a cave system in the hillside. If we can make it there." Another torch came through the window, then another. Smoke began to fill the cabin. Wyatt grabbed Lydia's hand and pulled her toward the back corner, kicking aside a rug to reveal a trap door. He yanked it open, revealing darkness below. "Go," he said. "I am right behind you." Lydia climbed down the ladder into the cellar, which was really just a root cellar dug into the hillside. Wyatt came down after her, pulling the trapdoor shut. Above them, they could hear the men whooping as the cabin started to burn. "This way." Wyatt lit a small lantern and led her through the cellar to where the dirt wall had been dug away, revealing a narrow opening. "It is tight, but we can fit." They crawled through the opening into a larger cave. Wyatt seemed to know exactly where he was going, leading her through twisting passages that climbed steadily upward. Behind them, the sound of the men's voices faded. They emerged finally on the hillside above the cabin, hidden by rocks and brush. From here, they could see the clearing below, the cabin fully engulfed in flames, the 5 men standing around watching it burn. Lydia felt tears sting her eyes. That cabin had been Wyatt's home, the life he had built with his own hands. And it was gone, Because of her. I am so sorry, she whispered. Wyatt was silent for a moment, watching the flames. Then he put his hand on her shoulder, solid and warm. It was just a building. You are alive. That is what matters. Where do we go now? There is an old mining camp about a day's ride north of here. It has been abandoned for years, but the structures are still standing. We can hole up there, figure out our next move. He looked down at her, his face smudged with smoke and dirt, but his eyes fierce. I am not giving up on you, Lydia. We are going to get through this. She believed him. Standing there on the hillside, watching everything he owned burn, he was thinking about protecting her. Something in her chest cracked open. Wyatt, she said softly. He looked at her, and the world narrowed to just the two of them. The space between them charged with everything they had not said. Then she kissed him. It was clumsy and desperate, her lips finding his through the smoke and fear. But he responded immediately. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and he kissed her back with a hunger that made her knees weak. He tasted like smoke and coffee and something wild. And Lydia wanted more of it. More of him. More of everything she had been denying for weeks. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Wyatt rested his forehead against hers, his hands still on her waist. I have wanted to do that for so long, he said roughly. Why did you not? Because you had just escaped one man trying to own you. I did not want you to think I was trying to do the same thing. Lydia pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. You are nothing like Clement. Nothing like any man I have ever known. You are good and strong and honest, and She took a breath. I think I love you. She saw the shock in his eyes, then the joy, then the fear. Lydia, you do not know what you are saying. You are grateful, and that is, do not tell me what I feel. She grabbed the front of his vest. I know the difference between gratitude and love. I know that I would rather be here with you, with nothing but the clothes on my back, than anywhere else in the world, with anyone else. I know that when I think about the future, you are in it. That is not gratitude. That is love. Wyatt stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he kissed her again. Slower this time, deeper, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When he pulled back, his amber eyes were bright. I love you too, he said simply. I think I have since that first day, when you stood in the canyon covered in dirt and told me you were running. You were so fierce, so determined. I fell right there. Lydia felt warmth spread through her chest, chasing away the fear and the cold. What are we going to do? We survive. We find somewhere safe. And then, he cupped her face in his rough hands. Then we figure out how to build a life together, if that is what you want. It is, she whispered. It is exactly what I want. They stayed hidden until the men below finally gave up and rode away, confident they had driven off or killed the mountain man. Then Wyatt led Lydia through the darkness, holding her hand, guiding her over rocks and through brush with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of this land. They walked through the night, stopping only when Lydia's exhausted body could not take another step. Wyatt built a small, smokeless fire in a sheltered spot and made them tea from some plant he gathered. They sat close together, sharing warmth, and Lydia rested her head on his shoulder. Tell me about this mining camp, she said. It was started back in '75 when someone thought they found silver in those hills. Turned out to be nothing, and everyone cleared out within a year. But they left buildings, equipment, everything. I used to store supplies there before I built the cabin. He stroked her hair absently. It is not much, but it will give us shelter while we make a plan. And then what? Then we need to get you somewhere safe. Those men might come back, or they might tell others. And if Clement is still looking for you. Wyatt's jaw tightened. We need to make you disappear properly. New name, new life, somewhere far enough away that nobody will find you. What about you? Lydia sat up to look at him. What will you do? His amber eyes met hers, steady and sure. I go where you go. The simple statement made her heart clench. You would leave these mountains? Your home? You are my home now. He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I told you I was like water, always moving. But water needs somewhere to flow to. You are my destination, Lydia. She kissed him again, pouring all her love and gratitude and fear into it. He held her like she was precious, like she was the thing worth protecting above all else. When dawn broke, they continued north. The terrain grew more rugged, the vegetation sparser. Lydia's feet ached in the borrowed boots, and her whole body was exhausted. But she pushed on. Wyatt matched his pace to hers, never complaining, always watching the trail behind them for signs of pursuit. It was late afternoon when they finally reached the old mining camp. It was nestled in a narrow canyon, protected on 3 sides by steep rock walls. The buildings were weathered and sagging, but still standing. A few cabins, a long bunkhouse, what looked like an old assay office. Rusted equipment lay scattered around, slowly being reclaimed by the desert. Wyatt checked each building carefully before declaring them safe. He chose one of the cabins, slightly better preserved than the others, and they settled in as the sun began to set. There was no furniture, but Wyatt spread out the furs he had grabbed from the cabin and made a bed. He built a fire in the old stove, which was still functional, and heated water for tea. It was primitive and rough, but after a night of walking, it felt like a palace. Lydia sat down hard, her body finally giving out. Wyatt knelt in front of her, checking her feet, her hands, making sure she had not injured herself. His touch was gentle but thorough, and Lydia felt a wave of love so strong it nearly brought tears to her eyes. You take care of everyone but yourself, she said softly. I am fine. Wyatt. She put her hand on his cheek, feeling the rough beard under her palm. You just lost your home, everything you built, and you are worried about my feet. He turned his head to kiss her palm. Your feet matter more than any building. Buildings can be rebuilt. You cannot be replaced. They ate a simple meal of jerky and hardtack from the supplies Wyatt had grabbed, then lay down together on the furs. Wyatt wrapped his arms around her, and Lydia pressed her back against his chest, feeling safe for the first time since they had fled. What was her name? She asked into the darkness. Your mother. Margaret. She was a teacher, like I said. Taught me to read, to love books. She would have liked you. His breath was warm against her neck. She always said I would find someone who matched my stubborn streak. Was she right? She felt him smile. Absolutely. They talked late into the night, sharing stories, learning each other. Wyatt told her about growing up on the farm, about the brother he had lost to fever when they were boys, about the first time he saw the mountains and knew he had to live in them. Lydia told him about her mother's death, about her father's slow decline into debt and desperation, about the books she had read that made her believe there was more to life than what she had been given. I always wanted to see the ocean, she admitted. Not from San Francisco, I have done that, but from somewhere wild, where it is just the water and the sky and nothing else. California has coastline like that, Wyatt said. North of San Francisco, rough and beautiful and empty for miles. Could we go there? We can go anywhere you want. He pulled her closer. Once we figure out how to keep you safe, we can go wherever makes you happy. Lydia turned in his arms so she could see his face in the firelight. You make me happy. He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. You make me feel like I have been waiting my whole life for you to show up. They made love that night, slow and careful, learning each other's bodies the way they had learned each other's stories. Wyatt touched her like she was something sacred, like he wanted to memorize every inch of her skin. Lydia had never known it could be like this. Gentle and fierce at the same time, something shared rather than taken. Afterwards, wrapped in his arms, she felt like she had finally come home. They spent the next few days at the mining camp, resting and planning. Wyatt scouted the area, making sure they were alone, checking for signs of pursuit. Lydia explored the camp, finding remnants of the lives lived here. A rusted pan, a broken pickaxe, a moldy book with pages too damaged to read. It was strange to think about all those people who had come here with dreams of silver and left with nothing. On the third day, Wyatt returned from scouting with a grim expression. We need to talk. Lydia's stomach dropped. They found us? No. But I have been thinking about our situation. Even if we run, even if we go to California or Oregon or Montana, you are still legally bound to Clement. He paid for you, and according to the law, you are his. That cannot be right. It is not right, but it is legal. Your father signed a contract. If Clement wants to enforce it, he can. Wyatt ran a hand through his hair in frustration. The only way out is if that contract is void. How do we do that? Marriage. He said it quietly. If you marry someone else, the contract is void. You would be legally bound to your husband instead. Lydia's heart started beating faster. Wyatt, I am not proposing, he said quickly. Not like this. You deserve better than a desperate escape plan. I am just saying, it is an option. If we could find a preacher, someone willing to marry us, you would be protected. And what would you get out of this arrangement? Lydia asked carefully. Wyatt looked at her, his amber eyes intense. You. That is all I want. She crossed the cabin and took his hands in hers. They were rough and scarred and strong. The hands that had protected her, that had held her, that had learned every part of her. Then marry me. Not as an escape plan. Marry me because I love you, and you love me, and because I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Lydia, is that not what you want? It is everything I want. His voice was rough with emotion. But I have nothing to offer you. No home, no money. Nothing but a life on the run until we can get far enough away to disappear. You have yourself, Lydia said fiercely. That is enough. That is more than enough. Wyatt pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Then yes, I will marry you. But we do this right. We find a preacher. We say the vows properly. I want you to have that. Where do we find a preacher out here? There's a town called Austin, about 40 miles west. It is big enough to have a church, small enough that we might not attract attention. We can ride there, get married, and be gone before anyone asks questions. He pulled back to look at her. It is risky, but I think it is our best option. Then we do it. They left the next morning at dawn, riding double on one of the horses Wyatt had retrieved from his corral the night after the fire. The other two horses had run off during the attack, but this one, a sturdy bay mare named Rosie, had stayed close enough for Wyatt to track her down. The ride to Austin took 2 days, traveling carefully, avoiding main trails. Wyatt taught Lydia to shoot from horseback, to track, to read the land. She was a fast learner, soaking up everything he said, like she was making up for all the years she had been kept inside city walls. They camped at night under the stars, making love under the vast Nevada sky. And Lydia had never felt more free. This life was hard, yes. It was uncertain and dangerous, nothing like what she had been raised for. But it was hers. She was choosing it. Austin was bigger than Lydia expected. A rough mining town clinging to the side of a mountain. The main street was all saloons and supply stores, with a church at the far end, its white steeple incongruous among the rough buildings. They tied Rosie outside a general store and went in to buy supplies. The proprietor, a heavy-set man with suspicious eyes, looked them over carefully. "You folks just passing through?" "Yes, sir," Wyatt said easily. "Heading to California. Thought we would stock up. That is a long ride." The man rang up their purchases. "You married?" "About to be," Lydia said, surprising herself with how easily the lie came. "We came here hoping to find a preacher." The man's expression softened slightly. "Reverend Taylor is at the church most days. Good man. He will treat you right." He bagged their supplies. "Word of advice, though. Get married and get out of town quick. Sheriff here does not like strangers lingering." They thanked him and headed to the church. Reverend Taylor was indeed there, an older man with kind eyes and work-roughened hands. He listened to their story, the edited version where Lydia was a widow heading west, and Wyatt was the guide who had fallen in love with her. "I can marry you," he said finally. "But I need to ask, are you both entering this marriage of your own free will?" "Yes," Lydia said firmly. "Absolutely," Wyatt added. The Reverend smiled. "Then let us begin." The ceremony was simple and quick, held in the small church with the Reverend's wife as witness. Wyatt did not have a ring, but he took a leather cord from around his neck and tied it around Lydia's finger, promising to replace it with gold when he could. "I do not need gold," Lydia whispered. "I just need you." When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Wyatt kissed her with a tenderness that made her eyes sting with tears. This was nothing like the wedding she had imagined as a girl. No fancy dress or crowd of well-wishers, but it was real and true and entirely theirs. They signed the marriage certificate, Wyatt signing his real name and Lydia signing as Lydia Zimmerman for the first time. It felt like shedding an old skin, becoming someone new. They were riding out of Austin within the hour. Lydia's heart light despite the danger still hanging over them. She was married. To Wyatt, the mountain man who had saved her life and then stolen her heart. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Zimmerman?" Wyatt asked as they rode. "Perfect," Lydia said honestly. "Absolutely perfect." They headed west toward California, taking back trails and avoiding towns. Wyatt hunted for food, and Lydia learned to cook over an open fire. She learned to set snares for rabbits, to gut and clean fish, to tan hides. Her hands grew calloused, her skin tanned, her body strong. And every night, she fell asleep in her husband's arms, safe and loved and free. They were 3 weeks out from Austin when they reached the California border. The landscape had changed gradually, becoming greener, the air carrying the faint scent of the ocean. Lydia felt hope bloom in her chest. They were going to make it. But hope was a fragile thing. They had stopped to rest at a creek, letting Rosie drink and refilling their water skins, when Lydia heard it. Hoofbeats, multiple horses coming fast. Wyatt heard it too. His hand went to his rifle, his eyes scanning the tree line. "Get behind me." 6 riders burst through the trees. Lydia's blood turned to ice when she recognized the leader. Clement Wordsworth, his fine suit now dusty and travel-worn, his soft face hard with fury. "There she is," he said, pointing at Lydia. "My runaway bride." Wyatt stepped in front of her, rifle raised. "She is not your anything. She is my wife." Clement laughed, a harsh sound. "Your wife? Do you think I care about some backwoods ceremony? I have a legal contract signed by her father. She belongs to me." "Like hell I do," Lydia spat, stepping out from behind Wyatt. Her own rifle was in her hands, steady despite her racing heart. "I am not property, Clement, and I will never be your wife." "You do not have a choice." Clement gestured to the men with him, hired guns by the look of them. "Now, you can come peacefully, or my associates here can make this difficult. Your friend can ride away and no one gets hurt. I am not going anywhere with you." "Then we do this the hard way." Clement nodded to his men. The hired guns drew their weapons, but Wyatt was faster. His first shot took one man in the shoulder. His second shot hit another in the leg. Lydia fired at a third, her bullet punching through his hat and making him dive for cover. Chaos erupted. Bullets flew, horses screamed, men shouted. Wyatt was moving, firing and reloading with deadly efficiency, keeping himself between Lydia and the hired guns. Lydia fired when she had clear shots, her training paying off. But they were outnumbered, and eventually, one of the hired guns got a shot through. Lydia saw Wyatt stagger, blood blooming on his left side. She screamed his name, firing wildly at the man who had shot him. Wyatt stayed on his feet, returning fire even as blood soaked his shirt. "Lydia, run! I am not leaving you. Run!" He fired again, dropping another hired gun. "Get to the trees. I will find you." Lydia wanted to argue, wanted to stay and fight beside him, but she saw the desperation in his eyes. If she stayed, they would both die. If she ran, at least he had a chance. She ran. Behind her, she heard more gunfire, more shouting. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs shook, until she could not hear anything but her own gasping breaths. She collapsed behind a fallen log, her rifle clutched to her chest, and waited. The forest grew quiet. Then she heard footsteps. Lydia raised her rifle, her finger on the trigger, ready to go down fighting. But the man who stepped through the trees was Wyatt. His face pale, his hand pressed to his side. Blood seeped through his fingers. "Wyatt!" She dropped the rifle and ran to him, catching him as his legs gave out. "Oh God, how bad is it?" "I have had worse." But his voice was weak, his skin clammy. "We need to keep moving. I drove them off, but they will regroup. You need a doctor." "No doctors, no towns." He leaned heavily on her. "There is a place, an old trapper's cabin, about 5 miles north. We can hide there, tend the wound." Lydia got under his arm, taking as much of his weight as she could. He was so much bigger than her, so much heavier, but she would carry him if she had to. She would do whatever it took. They stumbled through the forest, Wyatt directing her in a voice that grew weaker with each mile. Lydia talked to him constantly, keeping him conscious, keeping him moving. She told him about all the things they would do when they reached the ocean. She described the house they would build, the life they would have, the children they would raise. "That sounds nice," Wyatt mumbled. "Real nice." "Then stay with me. You have to stay with me." The cabin appeared finally, just as the sun was setting. It was small and rough, probably abandoned for years, but it had a roof and walls, and that was enough. Lydia got Wyatt inside and onto the floor, then went back for Rosie, who had followed them faithfully. She built a fire with shaking hands and heated water. Then she cut away Wyatt's shirt to examine the wound. The bullet had gone through his side, missing anything vital by what looked like inches. It was bleeding heavily, but it was not immediately fatal. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "Just do it." Lydia cleaned the wound as best she could, remembering the way Wyatt had treated her hands weeks ago. She packed it with clean cloth torn from her dress and bound it tight. Wyatt barely made a sound, but she could see the pain in his white-knuckled grip on the floor. When she was done, she covered him with their furs and lay down beside him, her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat. "You saved me again," she whispered. "Always will." His hand found hers in the darkness. "I love you, Lydia Zimmerman." "I love you too. So you have to get better, understand? I did not marry you just to lose you." "Yes, madam." The next few days were the longest of Lydia's life. Wyatt's wound became infected despite her best efforts, and he developed a fever. She stayed by his side constantly, forcing water down his throat, changing his bandages, keeping him as comfortable as possible. At night, when he was delirious, he called for his mother, for his lost brother, for Lydia. "I am here," she told him over and over. "I am right here. You are not alone." On the fourth day, the fever finally broke. Wyatt opened his eyes, clear and aware, and looked at her. "You look terrible." Lydia burst into tears. She had been so scared, so helpless, and now he was back and already teasing her. "You are such an ass." He laughed, then winced. "Still hurts to laugh." "Good. You deserve it for scaring me like that." She wiped her eyes, smiling through the tears. "Are you hungry?" "Starving." She made him broth from some dried meat and wild onions she had found, and he ate slowly, his strength clearly depleted. But he was alive. He was going to be okay. "What happened back there?" Lydia asked. "After I ran? I killed 2 of them, wounded the rest, including your friend Clement. He took a bullet in the shoulder. They retreated, and I covered my trail so they could not follow." Wyatt touched the bandage on his side gently. "You did good work here. Probably saved my life." "You have saved mine so many times. It was my turn." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. "We are even now." "We are partners," Lydia corrected. "That is different." Wyatt squeezed her hand. "Partners. I like that." It took 2 weeks for Wyatt to be strong enough to travel again. Lydia used that time to scout the area, to hunt, to take care of them both. She was surprised by how capable she had become, how much she had learned. The city girl who had jumped off the wagon seemed like a different person entirely. When they finally left the cabin, they headed north, following the coast. The ocean appeared on their left, vast and gray and beautiful. Lydia stood on a cliff overlooking the water and felt tears stream down her face. "We made it," she whispered. Wyatt put his arm around her waist, still moving carefully because of his healing wound. "We made it." They followed the coast for days, searching for the right place. Finally, they found it. A small cove with a freshwater creek, protected by cliffs on 3 sides, with a forest full of game nearby. It was wild and remote and perfect. "What do you think?" Wyatt asked. Lydia looked at the cove, at the ocean beyond, at the man beside her. "I think we are home." They built their cabin slowly, working together, Wyatt showing Lydia how to notch logs and chink walls. It took weeks, but eventually, they had a solid structure with a stone fireplace, a loft for sleeping, windows looking out at the ocean. It was small but sturdy, a place they had created together. As they worked, they talked about the future. Wyatt would trap and hunt, trading pelts at a town 2 days' ride inland. Lydia wanted to start a garden, to maybe raise chickens. Neither of them wanted much, just a quiet life together, away from the world that had tried to cage them both. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset over the ocean, Lydia said, "Do you ever regret it? Leaving the mountains for me?" Wyatt looked at her like she was crazy. "The mountains were where I went to be alone, but I do not need to be alone anymore. I have you. What if Clement comes back? What if he finds us? Then we deal with it together." He pulled her close. "I am not afraid of him, Lydia. The only thing I am afraid of is losing you." She nestled into his side, feeling safe and loved. "You are not going to lose me. I am not going anywhere." Months passed. Their cabin became a home filled with the life they were building. Lydia's garden flourished in the mild coastal climate. Wyatt built a hen house and traded for chickens at the inland town. They fell into a rhythm, working during the day, making love at night, existing in their own small, perfect world. It was spring when Lydia realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but she waited until she was sure before telling Wyatt. She found him outside, splitting firewood, his shirt off in the warm sun. He had healed completely from the gunshot, the scar just a pale line on his tanned skin. His muscles moved under his skin as he worked, and Lydia still felt a flutter in her stomach every time she looked at him. "Wyatt," she called, "I need to tell you something." He turned, immediately alert. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." She took a breath. "I am pregnant." The axe slipped from his hand. He crossed to her in 3 long strides, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." A smile spread across his face, transforming him from a stern mountain man into someone young and joyful. "We are having a baby." "We are having a baby," Lydia confirmed. And then she was swept up in his arms, spun around carefully, both of them laughing. The pregnancy was not easy. Lydia was sick for the first few months, and the isolation sometimes felt overwhelming. But Wyatt was there, patient and caring, holding her hair when she was sick, rubbing her feet when they swelled, talking to her belly about all the things he would teach their child. "If it is a boy, I will teach him to hunt, to track, to respect the land," he said one evening, his hand on her rounded stomach. "If it is a girl, I will teach her all that too. Plus, how to shoot any man who tries to tell her she cannot." Lydia laughed. "You are going to be such a good father." "I hope so." His expression turned serious. "I want our child to grow up free, like we are. I want them to know they can choose their own path. They will. We will make sure of it." When Lydia went into labor on a cold October night, she was terrified. They were miles from any doctor, any midwife, anyone who could help. But Wyatt stayed calm, boiling water, tearing sheets, doing everything he could to make her comfortable. "You can do this," he told her, his steady voice cutting through the pain. "You are the strongest person I know." It was long and hard and painful. But finally, as dawn broke over the ocean, Lydia heard the most beautiful sound in the world, her baby crying. "It is a boy," Wyatt said, his voice thick with emotion. He cleaned the baby carefully and placed him in Lydia's arms. "He is perfect." Lydia looked down at her son, at his tiny face and dark hair and perfect fingers. "Hello, William," she whispered, naming him after Wyatt. "Welcome to the world." Wyatt sat beside them, his arm around Lydia, his eyes on his son. "He has your eyes. He has your stubbornness. I can already tell." Lydia was exhausted but happier than she had ever been. "We did it. We made a family." "We did. Wyatt kissed her forehead. I love you, Lydia. Thank you for jumping off that wagon. She laughed through happy tears. Thank you for following me. Little William grew quickly, a healthy, happy baby who had his father's strength and his mother's curiosity. Wyatt carved toys for him, built him a cradle that rocked by the fire. Lydia sang to him, told him stories, taught him his letters as soon as he was old enough to understand. They expanded the cabin as William grew, adding a room for him, a larger workspace for Lydia. Wyatt built furniture, his skilled hands creating beautiful, functional pieces. Lydia started taking in sewing work from the inland town, using her city education to earn extra money. Life was not always easy. Winters were hard, supplies sometimes ran low. And there were nights when Lydia missed her old life, missed the comforts she had grown up with. But then she would look at Wyatt, at William, at the home they had built together, and she knew she would not change a thing. William was 3 when Lydia got pregnant again. This time it was easier, her body knowing what to do. When she gave birth to a daughter in the summer, she named her Margaret, after Wyatt's mother. She would have loved this, Wyatt said, holding his tiny daughter with such tenderness it made Lydia's heart ache. All of it. Tell her about her grandmother, Lydia said. So Wyatt told Margaret stories about the schoolteacher from Missouri, who had loved books and learning, and her wild son who never quite fit in. He told her about building this cabin, about finding Lydia in the canyon, about the journey that had led them here. The years passed in a blur of happy chaos. William learned to hunt and fish with his father, while Margaret learned to read and cook with her mother. But Wyatt made sure Margaret knew how to shoot too, and Lydia taught William to read and write and figure numbers. When William was 10 and Margaret was 7, a man arrived at their cove. He was old and weathered, riding a tired horse, and he introduced himself as a circuit judge. Lydia's heart stopped. Had Clement finally found them? But the judge's news was different. I am looking for Lydia Lancaster, he said. I have news about her father. Lydia stepped forward, Wyatt immediately at her side. I am Lydia Zimmerman. Lancaster was my maiden name. The judge looked between them, clearly putting the pieces together. Your father passed away 6 months ago. He left a letter for you with his lawyer, along with instructions to find you and deliver it. He handed Lydia an envelope, yellowed with age. She took it with shaking hands. There is more, the judge said. That contract he signed, the one with Clement Wordsworth, he had it nullified 3 years before he died. Wordsworth was charged with fraud, among other things. He died in prison last year. Lydia felt the world tilt. What? Your father found evidence that Wordsworth had misrepresented his finances, that the debt was not as large as he claimed. He had the contract voided and tried to find you to tell you. But by then, you had disappeared. The judge gestured to the envelope. It is all explained in the letter. After the judge left, Lydia sat on the cliff overlooking the ocean and read her father's words. He apologized profusely, explained how he had been desperate and foolish, how he had regretted his decision every day. He had worked tirelessly to find a way out of the contract, and when he finally succeeded, he had spent his remaining years searching for her. He died not knowing if she was alive, but hoping she had found happiness. I'm sorry I failed you, the letter ended. I hope someday you can forgive me. I hope you found a better life than the one I tried to force on you. Lydia cried, mourning the father she had loved, the relationship they had lost. But she also felt a strange sense of closure. He had tried to fix his mistake. He had tried to free her, not knowing she had already freed herself. Wyatt found her there and held her as she cried. When she finally told him what the letter said, he just held her tighter. "Do you regret leaving?" he asked quietly. "Now that you know," he tried to make it right. Lydia looked at their cabin, visible through the trees. She could hear William and Margaret playing, their laughter carrying on the wind. "No," she said firmly. "If I had not left, I never would have found you. I never would have had this life. My father gave me something in the end, even if he did not mean to. He gave me the push I needed to find my own path." "You gave yourself that," Wyatt corrected. "You were brave enough to jump. And you were brave enough to follow." They sat together as the sun set over the ocean. Two people who had found each other in the wilderness and built something beautiful from nothing. The years continued to pass. William grew tall and strong, eventually heading inland to work as a guide for settlers heading west, just like his father had once done. He wrote letters regularly, telling them about his adventures, about the people he helped, about the girl he met and fell in love with. Margaret stayed closer to home, eventually marrying a man from the inland town, a teacher who loved books as much as she did. They built a house near the cove, and Lydia and Wyatt became grandparents to 3 more children who ran wild on the beach and learned to read by firelight. Wyatt's hair went gray, then white. His body, though still strong, moved slower. But his amber eyes remained sharp, and his love for Lydia never wavered. On their 30th anniversary, Lydia woke to find Wyatt gone. She found him on the cliff where they had first seen the ocean together, watching the sunrise. "Could not sleep?" she asked, sitting beside him. "I was thinking about the day we met," Wyatt said. "You, covered in dust, telling me you were running away. I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen." "I thought you were terrifying," he laughed. "And now? Now I know you are the gentlest man alive, under all those muscles." She poked his arm, still solid despite his age. "You have given me such a good life, Wyatt Zimmerman. We gave each other a good life." He took her hand, the same hand he had tied a leather cord around 30 years ago. The cord had been replaced with a simple gold band years ago, when they finally felt safe enough to visit a proper town. But Lydia still had the original cord, tucked away in a box with their marriage certificate and all the letters from their children. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Below them, the ocean rolled endlessly, constant and free. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not jumped off that wagon?" Wyatt asked. Lydia thought about Clement, about the life she would have lived in Tonopah as a banker's unhappy wife. She thought about all the things she never would have experienced. The feel of a rifle in her hands, the taste of coffee made over a campfire, the sight of her children being born, the touch of a man who loved her for exactly who she was. "No," she said simply. "I do not wonder. I know exactly what would have happened. I would have died slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of me. Instead, I lived. Really lived. We both did." Wyatt pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him. "Thank you for letting me follow you into the wild. Thank you for being there to follow." They stayed on the cliff until the sun was fully up, then walked back to their cabin hand in hand. Their grandchildren would be arriving later for a visit. There was bread to bake, fish to clean, a life to continue living. Behind them, the ocean kept rolling, wild and free and constant, just like the love they had built together. Just like the life Lydia had claimed when she jumped off that marriage wagon and ran into the wild, where a mountain man was waiting to follow her home.